I opened the door at 6:42 a.m., half awake, not expecting anyone. But there they were, my father, my mother, and my sister, all standing like ghosts I thought I'd buried months ago. The same people who called my dream filthy, who kicked me out of their house for daring to chase light with a camera. Now they were on my doorstep, not with apologies, but with a price tag. $130,000 to save the daughter they always chose over me. And in that moment I realized, saying no wasn't cruelty. It was the first honest thing I'd ever said to them. I was 8 the first time I held a camera. It was a dusty old Polaroid my uncle left behind after Thanksgiving. I remember the way it clicked in my hands, loud, clunky, magical. I ran outside, barefoot on frostbitten grass, and snapped a photo of a squirrel hanging upside down on a branch. It came out blurry and crooked. But to me, it was perfect. My family didn't think so. At dinner, I showed it to my dad, eyes wide with excitement. He didn't even look, just said, "Hope you didn't waste film on squirrels again." My sister Caroline, of course, was the golden child. By that age, she already had 2 piano recitals under her belt and a shelf full of gold trophies for public speaking. She was precise, polished, impressive. Me, I had dirt under my nails and mosquito bites behind my knees. And that camera, that old, loyal, dusty camera. I spent summers crouched in backyards, waiting for dragonflies to land, photographing ants on dandelions, and chasing sunsets with the devotion of someone who believed light could explain the world. I didn't want a corner office or a fast car. I wanted silence, stillness, moments that didn't need words. But silence wasn't allowed in the Quinn household. Success was loud. It wore suits and shook hands. It got business degrees and married well. So when I told my parents, at 17, that I'd been accepted into the visual documentary program at the University of Colorado, with a partial scholarship, I expected hesitation. But I didn't expect that kind of fury. "You want to waste your life crawling in the dirt with a camera?" That was my dad's exact line. I remember it word for word. My mom just sighed. "We hoped you'd grow out of this phase." I asked for help with housing, just enough to get by since tuition was covered. Dad didn't blink. He said, "You picked mud. Live in it." And so I did. At 19, I packed what I could into a borrowed duffel bag, kissed my dog goodbye, and left for Portland. I found a matchbox apartment that smelled like old wood and lemon dish soap. Waitressed nights, interned at a local animal rescue during the day. My hands always smelled like espresso and dog fur. It was exhausting, it was humbling, and it was mine. I remember calling home the first week. Caroline picked up. "Still chasing squirrels?" she joked. I laughed, but I cried after I hung up. Still, I held on, I worked, I learned, I captured more than just images, I captured truth. That camera? It didn't just show me the world, it taught me how to see myself. Not as a disappointment, not as a footnote in someone else's success story, but as an artist, a woman, a creator of light. No one saw that version of me, not yet. Not my father, who still believed suits meant value. Not my mother, who measured worth in polite smiles. Not Caroline, who never looked past my dirt-stained jeans. But I saw her, and that somehow was enough to keep going. Even if no one else clapped, even if no one else believed, even if I had to build a whole life in silence. Portland was cold and damp that October, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones no matter how many sweaters you layered on. My apartment wasn't really an apartment, it was more of a converted attic, one window, no oven, and floors that creaked louder than my thoughts. But it was mine. I slept on a secondhand mattress on the floor, kept my gear in a repurposed pantry, and used the closet light as a makeshift darkroom lamp. Most nights, I worked until midnight at a diner off Hawthorne, pouring coffee for people who rarely tipped and pretending I wasn't tired. The job gave me just enough to pay rent, eat canned soup, and buy rolls of film when I could find a sale. My mornings, though, they were mine. I spent them at a small animal rescue center just outside the city, volunteering as an unofficial photographer. I didn't get paid, but I got something better. Access. To moments. Real ones. Dogs mid-bark, cats stretching into sunbeams, hamsters eating with both paws like they were holding treasure. One Saturday morning, I was photographing a pit bull named Marbles. He had a scar across his eye and a heart that could break yours if you watched closely enough. As he curled up with a stray kitten named Peaches, I caught it, the shot. That impossible shot of trust, quiet, and contrast. Muscle and fluff, scar and innocence, coiled together on a frayed blue blanket. I posted the photo that night to my barely followed blog. By morning, it had 12,000 shares. By afternoon, it was on the front page of a pet rescue forum. By the next week, I had 4 emails from small businesses, dog treat startups, eco-friendly pet shampoos, a local grooming brand. They didn't offer big money, but they offered something I'd never been given before: belief. I started freelancing, slowly, carefully, one product shoot at a time. I photographed grain-free kibble with natural lighting and hand-wrote captions for brand posts. Every dollar went into upgrading my gear and improving my small workspace. Then I launched a YouTube channel, Wild Heart Lens. It wasn't polished, it wasn't slick, but it was real. Tutorials, behind-the-scenes footage, how I found natural light in urban parks, how to coax a nervous rescue dog into trusting your lens. 6 months in, one of my videos, rescuing a trapped fawn, caught fire. 1 million views in 4 days. Comments flooded in. Wildlife magazines reached out. A documentary blog listed me as a new voice in ethical nature photography. My hands still smelled like dog fur and burnt coffee. My mattress was still on the floor. But I was building something, a name, a brand, a place where my love for quiet things had meaning. Still, I never told my family. I didn't bring it up on birthdays. I didn't send them the link when my subscriber count passed 500,000. When a national park used my footage for an education campaign, I just nodded silently at the email and went back to editing. Because something in me still believed they wouldn't care. Or worse, they'd say I got lucky. But I knew better. This wasn't luck. This was dirt. This was due. This was every blurry Polaroid and every cup of cold diner coffee that got me to this moment. This was the dream I planted in silence and watched bloom without applause. The invitation came in a group text. Family gathering next Sunday, big announcement, everyone expected, Dad. No warmth, no emojis, just a command in the form of tradition. I read the message twice before locking my phone and staring out the studio window where late autumn light filtered through bare branches. I shouldn't have gone. But part of me, some fragile leftover echo of childhood, still wanted to be seen. So I packed carefully, not clothes, not makeup, just one item, wrapped in thick brown paper and tied with twine, a photograph I'd taken in Tanzania. A lioness, mid-leap, her amber eyes catching the last light of day, her muscles poetry in motion. It had taken me 3 days in the bush to get that shot, 3 more to develop it properly, and a year of patience to be invited by the sanctuary at all. It was the best thing I'd ever made. I thought, maybe foolishly, that my father would be proud. That maybe this time I wouldn't be invisible. The Quinn house looked exactly as I remembered. White pillars, manicured hedges, a front door that creaked with quiet judgment. Inside, everything was symmetrical, cold, perfect, soulless. Caroline was already there, curled into the good armchair, sipping something pink from a crystal glass. Her nails were freshly done, glossy, pointed, unbothered. She glanced at the package in my arms. Still playing Wildlife, Barbie? I didn't answer, just smiled, that kind of half smile you wear when you've learned to survive without defense. Mom adjusted the cheese board with military precision while Dad poured whiskey like he was toasting a merger. When everyone had arrived, Dad clapped once, sharp and rehearsed. Let's gather in the living room. I sat on the edge of the couch, palms sweating against the wrapping paper on my lap. Mom already looked teary, and I didn't know if it was joy or something else. Then he spoke. We're proud to announce that Caroline will be launching her own real estate development firm, he said, grinning. And to support this next chapter, we'll be transferring a substantial investment, $350,000, from the family account into her venture. Applause. Everyone clapped, except me. I looked around the room. No one met my eyes. No one asked if I had news. No one wondered why I came holding something. So I raised my hand just slightly. Dad narrowed his eyes. Yes, Savannah? I cleared my throat. Will any of that support be extended to me? The room fell into glacier silence. He scoffed. You, he said, setting his glass down harder than necessary. You chose a hobby. Mud, bugs, sleeping in tents. That's not a business. That's a waste. I held up the wrapped photo, hands trembling just enough to notice. This was just accepted into National Geographic's winter feature. I thought, maybe you'd want to hang it in your office. He didn't look at it. Didn't ask what it was. Didn't touch it. Take that out of my house, he said. And then, as if that wasn't enough, pack your things, I want you gone tonight. No one said a word. Mom stared at the carpet like it might offer an escape hatch. Caroline swirled her drink and smirked into the rim. I waited, just a second, for someone to object. No one did. So I stood. Walked up the old staircase I used to race down in pajamas. Gathered the few items still in that house, a coat, a charger, a dusty box of childhood keepsakes, and made my way to the front door. But before I left, I unwrapped the lioness. I placed her on the entryway table, standing tall and wild in a cheap silver frame, and whispered softly, "Keep this. It's the only strength in this house." Then I walked out. No tears, no yelling. Just silence. But this time it wasn't silence born from fear. It was silence born from clarity. It was still dark when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Sharp, urgent, not the kind that waits. I rolled over, glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 6:42 a.m. Too early for deliveries, too early for anything, really. My heart stirred before my body did, a kind of unease I hadn't felt in months. The air in the studio was cold, the kind of cold that clings to concrete and doesn't apologize. I padded quietly to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see 3 figures. Dad, Mom, Caroline, all standing on the porch like ghosts that didn't know they'd been buried. Another knock, softer this time. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body between them and the life I had built. No smiles, no hellos. Just silence hanging heavy between us. Caroline stepped forward, her voice thin and brittle like a wine glass about to crack. "Savannah, please, just hear us out." She looked different, hollow, her eyes rimmed in red, clutching her purse like it held what was left of her dignity. Dad stood stiff behind her, hands folded behind his back like a man at a press conference. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't move. "We're desperate," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Caroline is being sued. The banks are involved. If we don't pay soon, you'll lose everything," I finished. Caroline wiped at her nose. "I messed up, okay? I trusted the wrong person. I thought I could handle it." I raised an eyebrow. "Like the way you handled mocking me at every holiday for a decade?" She flinched. "I didn't mean—" "But you did," I interrupted. "Every eye roll, every backhanded joke, every time you called my work a phase or a fairy tale, you meant it, and now you're here." Dad finally spoke. "Savannah, enough. This isn't about ancient history. This is about family. You don't abandon your blood." I stared straight at him. "You did." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "You abandoned me in front of a living room full of people," I said softly. "You threw me out because my dream didn't match your blueprint. And now you're on my doorstep because the golden child failed." "I'm still your sister," Caroline said, voice cracking. "And I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. For a moment, they almost landed. Almost. But then I remembered the framed lioness on the entryway table, the way Dad refused to even look at it. I remembered Caroline sipping her drink while I was told to leave like I was tracking mud through their perfect lives. "I forgave you all a long time ago," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean rescue." Caroline's lower lip trembled. "You have the money," she whispered. "This wouldn't even dent your income." "And that's exactly why I'm not giving it to you," I replied. "Because to you, I'm not a sister. I'm a checkbook." "No," Mom said, barely audible. "You're our daughter." "Only when it's convenient," I said. The cold crept in through the open door. It wrapped around them like the guilt they carried but never admitted. "I wish things were different," I said. "But they're not." And then, gently but firmly, I said the words they weren't ready to hear. "If you're looking for a savior, ask the daughter you chose." And I closed the door. No slam, no fury. Just finality. Then I made tea, and I stood by the window as their car disappeared down the snowy road. There was no joy in it, no triumph, just peace. And after everything, that felt like power. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted after I closed the door. No calls, no texts, no messages from anyone in the Quinn household. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had finally understood. That no really meant no. Then my inbox exploded. Subject lines like daggers. "How could you abandon your family? Fake animal lover. Your sister deserved better." At first, I thought it was a mistake, a spam wave or an algorithm glitch. Then I clicked one of the emails. Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook post. From Caroline, tagging me. Public. Hashtags. Links. The caption started with, "It's painful to share this, but I'm out of options." I stopped breathing. She called me cold, unrecognizable, said I chose pride over compassion, said she and my parents had begged, cried, but I shut the door in their faces, literally. She ended it with, "I still love her, but I don't know who she is anymore." It wasn't just a post. It was a narrative, a weapon dressed in vulnerability. And the internet ate it up like sugar. Within hours, the comments on my studio's Instagram turned venomous. Under a photo of a rescued fox, "Hope the fox knows you're heartless." "You make money off animals but ignore your own blood?" Fake nature girl. I blinked, scrolling through the flood. Then came the emails. One from Wanderwild Foods pausing our upcoming product shoot due to current PR concerns. Another from a well-known camera brand I'd partnered with twice. "Given recent sentiment, we'll be postponing all campaigns until further notice." And worst of all, 3 clients canceled their winter wildlife workshop bookings. Just gone. Mia, my assistant, knocked gently on my door that afternoon. "You okay?" I nodded, too stunned to speak. But inside I felt it, the slow unraveling of something I had bled to build. That night I sat in my dark room, usually my safest place. But even there I couldn't find peace. The red light felt harsh. The silence was no longer comforting. It was accusing. I met my lawyer, Raj, the next morning at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a bakery. I handed him my laptop and watched as he scrolled through the screenshots. Her post, the comments, the sponsorship losses, the analytics from my channel, views dropping, ad revenue tanking. After half an hour, he closed the screen and looked at me. "This is defamation, Savannah, textbook and traceable." I said nothing. "I'm not saying you have to go to court," he continued, "but you have every right to." I took a long sip of my coffee, bitter and cold. "She's my sister," I finally said. "She was," Raj replied, gently but firmly, "until she made you the villain in a story she rewrote to save herself." Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, soft, delicate, uncaring. I remembered the look in Caroline's eyes when she stood on my porch. Desperate, yes, but not sorry. Not really. She hadn't come to apologize. She had come to warn me, subtly, quietly, that if I didn't say yes, she'd make sure the world saw me as the villain. And she kept her promise. I inhaled slowly, set my mug down, and looked Raj in the eye. "Draft the lawsuit." He didn't smile. He just nodded. "We'll file Monday." Courtrooms aren't like the movies. There's no dramatic music, no slamming of fists or gasps from the back row. Just fluorescent lights, dull carpet, and people speaking in tones so flat they could put a storm to sleep. The hearing took place 6 weeks after we filed. Caroline sat across from me in a tailored navy suit and perfectly controlled makeup. She looked like the version of herself she always wanted the world to see, composed, capable, poised. But her hands, they trembled when she picked up her water. I didn't look at her much. I didn't need to. Raj did the talking. He walked the judge through every step of what had happened. Screenshots of the Facebook post, the LinkedIn caption, the Reddit thread, the comments, the clients who canceled, the sponsorships lost, the analytics, graphs that showed the sharp drop in revenue from the day Caroline hit post. He spoke with the kind of clarity that left no room for doubt. No theatrics, just truth. Her defense team argued emotional distress. They called it a personal plea, not a public attack. They said Caroline never named my business directly, as if that mattered. The judge listened quietly, took notes, looked up only once, to ask about the studio's lost income projections. Raj answered with a spreadsheet. And the silence that followed, it was heavy, weighted with the kind of obviousness you can't explain away. Because intent isn't louder than impact. And impact, mine, was quantifiable. Measured in numbers, in cancellations, in broken trust. By the time closing statements ended, Caroline still hadn't looked at me. And I still hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. When the ruling came, it landed like a gavel on glass. The defendant is ordered to pay $132,000 in damages for financial loss and reputational harm. Furthermore, the defendant must issue a formal public retraction on all platforms where the defamatory content was originally published. The retraction shall be written and approved by counsel. No vague apologies, no shifting blame. No one gasped. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of victory. It was the kind that sits deep in your chest and says, you were right to protect yourself. Outside the courthouse, Raj asked if I wanted to issue a public statement. I shook my head. "No need," I said. "The silence will speak louder." We parted ways at the steps. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't call anyone. That evening, I walked the forest trail behind my studio alone. The snow crunched beneath my boots, soft and steady. My breath rose in clouds, and above me the moon was barely a sliver, thin, quiet, resolute. There was no fire in my chest. No thrill. Just something clean, like air after a thunderstorm. The kind of peace that doesn't ask to be noticed, but refuses to be disturbed. When I got back inside, I hung up my coat, poured a cup of tea, and sat at my desk. Not to reply to the flood of emails. Not to post a victory, but to edit. A fox in motion, its tail blurred behind it, but its eyes sharp, wild, and unafraid. Just like I had become. The letter arrived 3 days later. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, handwritten, slanted cursive in familiar ink. The kind of envelope you recognize before you even see the return address. It was from my mother. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside me, and read every word. "Savannah, I wish things had gone differently. I don't know how to fix this. Your father is still furious. Caroline has moved back in. There's silence in every room. I want to believe there's still something left of this family to save, but I know it's not your job to do that anymore." I read it twice, then folded it gently and tucked it into the drawer beside my film rolls, not out of anger, but out of peace. They drew the line when they asked me to leave. All I'd done was learn how to keep it. That weekend, the forest was blanketed in snow. I bundled up and met 6 of my students at the trailhead just after sunrise. Puffy coats, fogged up lenses, nervous laughter. We spent hours waiting for the right light to break through the evergreens. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. And that was enough. At one point, a student, Ben, the quiet one with the chipped thermos, turned to me and said, "I used to think photography was about freezing things, but now, I think it's about breathing with them." I smiled. He got it. That night, back in the studio, I edited a series of shots from the day. A red fox halfway through a leap, a chickadee with snow on its beak, a ray of golden sun threading through pine needles like silk. I didn't check the analytics. I didn't open Instagram. I didn't care who saw it, because something had shifted. For so long, I had measured myself in shadows, what they thought of me, what they refused to see. I had edited myself down to silence, hoping to fit the frame of their approval, but I didn't need their applause. Not anymore. I was the light. I had always been the light, even when they looked away. Later that night, I lit a single candle and ate a slice of chocolate ganache cake I'd bought just for myself. No milestone, no occasion. Just because I could. And because I no longer needed permission to celebrate. I poured a glass of wine, stood by the window, and watched the snow fall in the backyard. My boots were by the door, my camera bag on the chair, my tea warm again in my hand. It was quiet, but this quiet didn't feel like exile. It felt like ownership of my story, of my truth, of a life that no longer waited at closed doors for someone to let me in. There was no applause that night, but the fox outside looked up at me through the glass, snowflakes clinging to its whiskers. And that was enough. Some of you might say I was harsh, that I should have forgiven, stepped up, written the check. But here's the truth. Family is not an excuse for abuse. Love is not a reason to lose yourself. And boundaries, they're not revenge, they're survival. So if you've ever been told you're only valuable when you're useful, if you've ever been asked to bleed for people who once called you a disappointment, let me remind you, you are not selfish for choosing peace. You're just done being erased. And that choice, that quiet, brave, soul-saving choice, that is the loudest kind of freedom. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, where we tell stories of silence that turned into strength and endings that begin with one word, enough.